Before I introduce our guest, let me say hi to a special partner, special friend for this interview, Jeremy Cohen, joining me for this one, which you'll find out why in a bit. This is a big one. How you doing, Jeremy?
I'm doing all right. I would have been better if the Yankees had won, but that's 0.6% of the season done. We got time. They're fine.
I am going to lie and say that I watched one pitch of that game.
It was a great pitch too.
Was it a great pitch? Good.
That's one awesome pitch, yeah.
No, I spent most of the day with my newborn laying on my chest because my wife had things to do, such as dad life, which I am now getting a break from to do this. I cannot say how excited I am to welcome this guest to the show. He's someone that has been kind enough to have a lot of conversations with offline over the last several months as we pester each other with questions about RJ Barrett and occasionally other players, but mostly RJ Barrett. I think that's like 90% of the thing that we talk about, but we're going to talk about some other stuff today. He is the general manager of the Nashville Soccer Club, of course, Major League Soccer. Welcome to the program, Mike Jacobs. How are you, sir?
Doing really well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Well, needless to say, the pleasure is ours. It's not every day that we get someone who runs an actual professional sports franchise on this show. So before I get into everything, and Jeremy and me have a lot that we want to try to get to, let me just say thank you for taking the time, because in my mind, when you run a professional team, it's like, 25/8 job, but you've managed to take some time today. So maybe it's not that intense.
Look, I really appreciate it. And I know you and I, we message back and forth, with our man love for RJ Barrett, my guilty pleasure, is the Knickerbockers. And, even at an exhibition game in Bradenton, Florida last night, I was watching the game on my phone.
There you go. I wish you had not done that.
Me too. Yeah.
So before we get into some of the stuff about, team building and all that good stuff that I know we want to spend most of our time on, I'm just curious because, you hear these stories about people who end up running teams or coaching teams or, owning teams or whatever, and they all have these different paths that they take. So I'm curious, was there like one moment where you realized that you wanted to have a career in sports? And if so, when and where did that come about?
It's an interesting one because, I grew up playing a lot of sports, I think like most people do. And my father was a junior high school basketball coach at IS 183, Paul Robeson. So my family's in the Bronx. I grew up primarily in Rockland County. If you travel to the Tappan Zee Bridge, I went to Tappan Zee High School.
Okay.
So, grew up playing a lot of sports and primarily, soccer and basketball. But I think having a parent who is so vested in sports, I think, growing up with tales of Willis Reed and Clyde and Dave DeBuscher, so firmly entrenched into who I was, I think my own DNA, even when I got involved in coaching, I was kind of like Doogie Howser, I played at Pace University, but by age 20, I was also coaching a varsity soccer team in Westchester. At 24, I was the youngest head coach in the country at Iona College, and I think we had a weekend where we traveled by bus down to North Carolina to play in a tournament against Duke and NC State. And at the time, Duke was number one in the country. We had lost in overtime to them. This was probably like 97, 98. And the next day we ended up being NC State. And, for in any sport, when you think about Iona College, to be even be competing in the same platform, in the same sporting event as a Duke or NC State is unique. And, for us to be even up with that Duke team was number one in the country. And, that State team we beat the next day wasn't a slouch either. But, what I kind of felt on the ride back, I kind of felt that there were a lot of players on our team would have been happy just taking the Deegan down and play Manhattan College, and get back to campus early rather than testing their mettle against the best players and teams in the country. And, I think for me, that was something I always wanted to do. And, I think whether it was testing or challenging myself, I think I knew I was going to have to probably leave what I was doing, leave Iona, leave New York. But, I also just kind of felt like I always wanted to be in a situation where I was going to be tested and challenged. And I think, growing up in New York in the 70s, I grew up, in the a stone's throw from Giant Stadium, so every weekend I was going to Cosmos games. So, to see what it was like, and hear people say, well, when is soccer going to make it here in the United States? And I'm thinking like, I was there at Giant Stadium for 80,000 people, so it was here. I just think, it went away, in 1983 and 1984, the NASL, it folded, so for someone with aspiration to be involved in professional sports, for someone with aspirations of, being involved in soccer at a different level, it kind of went away. And I think when MLS came back in 1996, for me, I just felt in some capacity, I had friends who were playing in the league. I just kind of felt in some way, I always want to be involved, at that level, in that league.
I remember as a kid going to Chelsea Piers and seeing some Metro stars and connecting in the late 90s. And speaking of young ages, how did it feel for you as being the youngest coach in college? And what kind of was running through your mind? How was that experience?
It was really humbling getting a chance to do that. I think everyone has a certain level of self-confidence and belief in themselves, but until you actually get a chance to go out and do it, you don't really know. And my first year as a head coach, we were 1-17-1, 17 losses, 12 by 1 goal. Those are the kind of losses like, you want to walk around like on West Side Drive. I
was about to say that's some 2018-19 Knicks stuff, except those were not close games, so maybe not.
But I'll tell you what, my athletic director at the time, Rich Petriccioni, who was a GA at one time at Iona for Jim Valvano,
Oh, wow.
So he had a chance to, to be ingrained culturally in not only how to achieve, but, without thinking about, Coach Valvano's speech, about how to dream and how to aspire to achieve big things. And at the end of that season, he sat me down and he said, look, he goes, before we kind of get into like a wrap up of your year, help walk me through your plan. And I asked what he meant. And he said, look, he goes, you won 1 game out of 19. Please tell me there's like a method to this. Like you've got a plan of where this is going, And again, like I was very young, and it was just amazing baptism under fire to learn how to that craft, because most people who go into coaching, they start out playing probably at a high level. Maybe they're a graduate assistant somewhere. They work their way up. I had this incredible baptism where I had a chance to kind of learn, on the fly and to learn from practical experience. And I mentioned obviously at 12 of those losses by 1 goal. But that team we had, we started, I think it was 8 freshmen, 2 sophomores, so that group, only won 1 game, that young group. The next year, a sophomore and juniors won 12 games, when Soccer America wrote an article, it was how it was from worst to first, and I love the fact that we didn't win a conference championship or advanced NCAAs, but it was cool to kind of see, this whole thing kind of come to fruition. And, going from coaching what I'm doing now, I always thought I loved coaching. Again, my father coached and I was always around that. I think as time went on, I came to appreciate it. I think I liked coaching. I loved building teams. The idea of constructing something and watch it kind of come to fruition. I went from being a head coach at Iona to then being the assistant coach at University of Evansville. Imagine like it was 2000. So at age 30, moved to Evansville, Indiana, which is the polar opposite, the New York metropolitan area.
I was about to say, if I'm not sure I've ever heard of that place before in my life.
I'll tell you what, when I got asked about it at the time, I said I knew 3 things about Evansville, Indiana. I lived in New York. Donnie Baseball, Don Mattingly was one of them.
There you go.
Okay. My daughter, my oldest daughter, who's 23 and graduated from St. John's, she lives in Queens right now. Her first de facto boyfriend, in 6th grade, was Don Mattingly's stepson. So we spent time together. What an amazing, during COVID, when we had our challenges, I actually texted back and forth with Don as they were going through their stuff with the Miami Marlins.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Yeah. So Don was from Evansville. I knew the basketball team, the Purple Aces, were the last team that had sleeves on their jerseys. They were these short sleeve, polyester shirts was a nightmare to look at.
That's a good name too, Purple Aces. I like that.
Oh yeah. But I also knew their soccer team was, that they were a national title contender. And, as this really small mid-major, they were the 2nd smallest Division I school as far as student enrollment. Mm-hmm. They went to the Final Four in 85, the Final Four in 90, so even this small school, they had this, this amazing tradition, for soccer. And for someone like myself who wanted to aspire to compete against the best players and teams, I kind of had to leave New York to do that. I had to probably leave being a head coach, like in this mentorship. So I was Evansville for 2 years before I went to work at Duke University. And I was there for, about 5 years. But, when I was at Duke, it was my first opportunity to work at a school where the team had their worst season in school history the year prior. I mean, we had 3 seasons we number one in the country. We went to the College Cup, like soccer's equivalent of the Final Four. It was just amazing, like think tank, because everyone there, like the first time in my life, I worked somewhere where everybody aspired to win like everything. My boss used to joke if he couldn't find me, he was going to Cameron. I was always down there, and like watching practice. And, I was there all 4 years, JJ Redick's career in college,
wow.
But like, it's about a think tank at the time. The assistant coaches on the basketball team there were Johnny Dawkins, Steve Wojciechowski, Chris Collins.
Chris. Okay, Chris is a friend of my brother's actually.
Really?
That's funny. Yeah. I spent the night in his living room, I think, once.
That's really funny. He and I once spoke in a panel where he talked about growing up in Philly and being in a locker room messing around as Doug Collins' son with Joe Bryant's son messing around in the locker room.
That's good. Yeah, no, Chris is a nice guy.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
No, it's just I think at that point I definitely liked coaching, but I think the opportunity to get to put a group together and be charged with the identification, the scouting, the recruitment, and trying to put together the field. I mean, I think at that point it kind of went from like, man, this would be cool to do someday, like at that level, to now say maybe I can do this. Maybe I have the ability to maybe it's realistic.
So I think there's a lot that we want to get into with what you just brought up about team building. I know Jeremy wants to hit on some of the cultural stuff. I'm just hearing you talk about how, okay, so you had a head coaching experience at basically the toughest place you could possibly have it. And then you went and you had coaching experience at not the easiest, because nothing's ever easy, but like it's Duke. And then that's all under the umbrella of coaching. And then you bring that to the team. Like, you've had so many different types of experiences up until this point. Do you think that has helped you? I mean, I'm sure it has helped you become a more successful GM in your job now. Can you start to think about how it has helped you, or is it just kind of all a mishmash?
I know you want to get into team building at some point, but what I have to say, I'm actually really surprised about is how few coaches there are, like former coaches in our league who serve in a similar role that I do.
Does that surprise you with soccer in particular, or does that just surprise you in like sports in general?
I don't think I noticed it until like my first like general managers meeting. Like in our sport, they call it like a CSO, like a chief soccer officers.
Okay.
Essentially each team is general manager. The first time I walked in a meeting like that, I looked around that I couldn't get over like how few people in the room had ever coached at any level before. Forget about like in MLS or in college. And, the idea of like building a team, I think what happens is you get a lot of people as fans of their sport, whatever their sport is, who see two players and say, well, look at these guys, they're good players. For me, I think like in the simplest of terms as a coach, you think all the time about cohesion. Like, how are these pieces going to fit together? So, like in our team, look like our team now at Nashville Soccer Club, we put our first team together last year. We were an expansion team. Our two players in the middle of midfield both represented their countries. Annabelle Godoy played in the last World Cup for Panama. He just got his 100th cap, like 100th appearance for his country this week. It's amazing. Wow. We paired him with Dax McCarty, who was the captain of the New York Red Bulls when they won a Supporters Shield a couple years ago. But it wasn't, hey, these guys are good players. Annabelle, they're both connectors. They're both like leaders in a locker room and on the field.
Yeah.
But Annabelle also, he's bilingual, so he can interact with players who speak English, players who speak Spanish. Annabelle's left-footed, Dax is right-footed. Annabelle tends to penetrate more by passing. Dax tends to penetrate more by dribbling. Like for me, it kind of felt it wasn't like, hey, here's these two good players. Here are these players whose games should fit together. And, when you think about teams, like bring it back to what we're talking about today about like the NBA, you look at some of these teams and you watch, it's going through a draft process, as you're watching different lineups that they're constructed. I'm blown away sometimes by like how little thought goes into like, how will these pieces play together?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm also curious what your thoughts are in terms of how they, coexist even off the pitch. How much do you take into consideration who they are as people and other attributes? How heavily are they weighed? At what point does one win out on the other? Because, we hear about how, of course, talent, Dave Gettleman saying you don't quit on talent and trading Odell Beckham Jr. So at what point do you kind of weigh all of the options and then make that decision?
I mentioned Godoy. He's an underrated player in general. Center midfielders in soccer. I mean, it's probably a cross between a point guard as far as running a team, but maybe an anchor, like a center sometimes. In the right when Mitch is in the mood and he's healthy, maybe like that. I think someone like both Annabelle and Dax, they're connectors in a locker room as well. They're both guys who have reputations for not only being seasoned veterans, but they're also really good at young players, being demanding of them, but also being able to kind of bring them along. And what was really important for us in our first year, in our first locker room, we were only going to have 2 languages that were going to be spoken. And it wasn't because we were going to be derogatory to any different ethnic group, as much as the fact we just thought in year 1, trying to assemble this group, making sure as many of these guys could communicate with each other freely was critically important. So the only 2 languages in our locker room were going to be Spanish and English. And out of the players who were primarily Spanish speaking, who weren't ESL, who were primarily Spanish speaking, out of that group, only 2 didn't speak English fluently.
Oh, wow.
Out of the domestic players, the players who were born in the United States and primarily English speaking, I think we had 7 different players who spoke Spanish fluently. I did on Duolingo. I did 500 consecutive days. It helped during the pandemic to have something to do. But it was really important to me. Again, both my parents, being born and raised in the South Bronx and teaching there. As I was going through school, my father tried to play with me to take Spanish. He said at some point it'd be the primary language in our country. I remember vividly the year was 1982. Because that year, the World Cup final was Italy versus West Germany. It was before Germany had unified. And I said, look, I said, totally get it. Whenever wins the World Cup, I'm taking that language. Italy won. I took it in high school and college. It helps me when I go to Frankie and Johnny's F&J Pine on Bronxdale Avenue. It helps me when I go to Acquisa Trattoria in Queens. Other than that, it probably was a waste of 8 years of my life academically. But I would tell you, we have intensive English language courses for our players who are primarily Spanish speaking. We've worked on intensive English course or Spanish speaking courses for the rest of our staff. How do you say you're respectful of somebody and they're important to you, you appreciate them if you can't converse with them fluently?
As opposed to falling asleep at a draft workout, which is maybe the opposite of being. But we don't have to talk about that era in Knicks basketball. We'll get some more Knicks stuff in a bit. I'm hearing you talk about. So it's painfully obvious how seriously you take that aspect of the job, making sure that the culture is right, that the culture is right in the locker room, and that the culture is right on your end from the front office, and that is a cohesive entity. I'm wondering when you're watching, well, let's say the Knicks, right? And you see something on the court maybe that is not making basketball sense or complete basketball sense. You might want to say Elfrid Payton, just to throw a name out there, right? Does your mind immediately wonder, is there something else going on maybe behind the scenes that is a reason that he's getting time? Or do you how do you interpret that as someone who, again, this is part of your job to figure this type of stuff out?
Well, I'll share some really unique ties in sport, whether it's in the NBA or other sports also, because what's been really important to me, I'm so passionate about turning my dream into a career. I pinch myself sometimes, to your point before I have to do this for a living. It's surreal, one day I mentioned to Jonathan before, Frank Isola, when I've talked to him, he jokes that I have Stockholm syndrome, that I could find a way to turn any negative into positive. I've identified with my captor that they're actually good people, and I find my brother John and his best friend Brian will be listening to this at some point. That they'll love me shamelessly using their names as well. But I get asked all the time about, I'm sure as you guys do, about what is Elf doing out there? Does Reggie Bullock have dirty photos of Tibbs? Why are they out there? And what What I would say is long before he became the coach of our team, I had a chance last year at the Sloan MIT Sports Analytics Conference to listen to a panel that included Tibbs. And I even texted Frank Dern. I said, I'm going to go over and try to talk to him afterwards. What was amazing was when these sessions are over, the Harvard and MIT students who just like harass and attack these speakers with resumes, trying to get internships. I couldn't get close to Tibbs, but I was blown away in this panel was him talking about, the perceived like old school, like methods, mentality he has to new age basketball. And whether it was Morey Ball, like in Daryl Morey, he created the Sloan MIT conference. He spoke also. I watched him play chess for an hour. I mean, I think something was boring. That was how dialed in I was. I want to see Daryl Morey's thought process playing chess, but it was interesting listening to Tibbs talk about whether it's threes instead of twos, whether it's how he's used analytics. But it really took me that day listening to him. And I think about all the time watching Knickerbockers is he referenced looking at plus minus and looking at different combinations of players. And I think all the time, I'm for sure, like in Tibbs we trust, so to me, I mean, like I would tell the times that I challenge his thought process, I mean, he's going to forget way more than we'll ever learn in our life when it comes to like basketball tactics. I think like the most important role, maybe the most important role of the general manager or in basketball, the president of basketball operations is who you're going to hire, who you're going to empower on game day to take your chess pieces and put them to work, so I think, end of the day, Leon Rose and his team have to get it right of identifying the right coach. So I think clearly it's Tibbs, so I have a lot of faith in him. And but what I will say, watching sometimes, think to myself, like, why this combination of players? Most coaches are very short-term in their thought process. I have to win right now to keep my job. Most front office executives, they're tasked with, I have to win now, but I have sustained success, for the next 4 or 5 years. So like the idea of trading for Derrick Rose, my guess is Tibbs is like banging on Leon Rose's door saying, hey, look, I need something now. Okay. Leon Rose probably thinking to himself, how can I acquire the best player, with the fewest assets as possible so I don't hemorrhage the future? So I could help my coach now, make sure he feels good now, what he has, coach his team today, but keep building for the future.
How do you handle that if your coach were to do that to you? Because or maybe has something like this happen?
Yeah, I would tell you. So it's interesting in soccer. So in basketball, we have a trade deadline. In soccer, we have these figurative transfer windows. And it's a figurative window that opens and allows you to business, and then closes, and then you spend the rest of the time in between those windows preparing for the next window. There's the primary window in our sport is in January, and then the secondary window is in the summer. And I would tell you, like each summer window, like the middle of our season. So I've been with Gary Smith, our head coach. This is our 4th season together. We did 2 years together. It was essentially like AAA baseball, like the USL, like the level right below MLS. So we worked together in this combination as a GM and head coach there. And now this is our 2nd year in MLS together. And I would say each summer window, I just thought that it was really important to identify a need of his to make sure that he felt good about the group he had going on a stretch run. Mm-hmm. But also there's a lot of confidence in me that like I'm listening to him. I understand what his needs are. I always talk about like not compromising the future for the present. I'm also willing to test boundaries to see what we can do in our sports. You can loan players and you can maybe acquire players, like the Derrick Rose deal, maybe giving as few assets away as possible to do that. To me, I think that even we message a little bit, essentially Christmas Day on the deadline day, talk about what can happen, I really appreciate the fact that I can only imagine like the pain that Tibbs is probably putting Leon Rose and his staff through the 48 hours prior to a better point guard, more 3-and-D help, whatever it is, more depth in general, I can appreciate that. All I kept saying to myself was like, please don't give up any like key assets. In my head was, man, we talked about like Lonzo in the past, look, I would love them to get Lonzo, but if you can do it now, not giving much up, I think it'd be great. If the only way you can do it is by giving too many assets up, I'd roll the dice the way you have, because Tibbs has made it work so far. He's rubbing stones together, trying to make it work, to be where they are today. I think it's amazing what he's done with the personnel he's working with. But I would just say in general, I think as I watched it, I think to myself, so I flew down to Bradenton, Florida yesterday to watch our team play. And this time of the year, and it definitely drew this from Bill Parcells from his time with the Giants, they did like a self-scout. This time of year, I think it's all about like evaluating our players. And comparing them to other players in our league, compared to other players that that we're looking to have, can this guy fit into a key role in our team right now? Can he, A, B, can he fit maybe to a contributing role, maybe like as off the bench or as a smaller role, or C, could he evolve into somebody maybe who could grow into a larger role in the future? So to me, even as I'm watching Knickerbockers, I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if Reggie Bullock is my choice, my player of choice that I would like in that 3-guard type rotation what they have. But I also kind of feel like for a 3-and-D guy, for the amount of money they spent, really on the rummage bin, grabbing him, Alex Burks, who's been tremendous, Austin Rivers, I don't think there's a swing and miss. I mean, I think, until you get a guy in, you don't really know if they'll fit or not.
Yeah.
Look, early in the season, I think it's Utah. I think, it was like, holy cow, this guy is going to be unbelievable.
We all love that signing, $3 million, whatever. It's nothing.
Yeah. But I would just say, I kind of look at it like, how can you make, as I'm watching, I would tell you I probably watch a little differently, that I'm probably not as critical of roster moves or in-game decisions, probably because I live with that, it doesn't mean I want to see Elf out there, but I mean, but at least I get it. I get why he's there, I get that, when you look at what he got, I think they're only guaranteed contracts, and they have 5 guys guaranteed this next year.
Yeah.
So in theory, they could let all those spare parts they brought in this last year, let them all walk, go after some bigger free agents, and still finish a roster up think about getting a cohesion, core guys that you think have qualities that fit. And I think sometimes it's guys who have a history with the coach, like Taj or like D Rose. Look, I thought for sure this summer they're getting DJ Augustine. I think you could write it in 10.
I thought he was more likely to be on this team than anybody else on the roster last year. I would bet anything on it.
I thought even during a trade deadline, I thought they were trying to make a move for him. And my worry was again, how much, if you're Leon Rose, and again, if Tibbs is banging on your door saying, I need my guys, how much are you willing to compromise to do that? And but I guess what I would say is whether it's DJ Augustine next year, whether it's Alec Burks or Nerlens Noel or Reggie Bullock this year, I think if you've got a sharp guy, and look, the team that Leon has assembled, you have your shot callers. That's like Rick Campbell always uses on NBA radio. I am perpetually driving back and forth this NBA radio. When I lived in New York, I was married since divorced, but I used to live in Englewood. Okay. I taught in the South Bronx, at the Grand Concourse, Host Lincoln Academy. Mm-hmm. My commute was 11 miles. But it was like an hour and a half to 2 hours each way, and I would go from Englewood to the South Bronx, to the Grand Concourse. At the end of the day, I'd race from there to New Rochelle to Iona. Uh-huh. That was done, I'd go to Bayonne, New Jersey, where I was working with a professional team at night. I'd volunteer my time.
That's a trip.
So you think about just gas and tolls alone, the money I was losing. But what I would say is like most New York sports fans, listen to a lot of sports radio. Yeah. And now I only live 5 minutes from my office, but my son asked me the other day if we have any other stations other than NBA radio. My brother's convinced that when I turn off, the ratings go to 0.0.
I'm sure it's quality programming.
Yeah. But I think a lot about especially on deadline day, listening a lot. I get it, and I just think I think the most important job in year one for Tibbs is building a foundation of guys that, look, even if it's a 50% turnover next year, at least he's got 6 guys now. I think we'd all say going into last year, who knows what they had, but for Leon to put his group together, Brock Aller and, the team he's put together, his coaching staff and his back room staff, they're the right group of guys making decisions. So whether it's Rick Campbell has his shot callers, whether it's your decision makers, whoever is got their finger on the button, I think it's the right group of guys make those decisions. Maybe for the first time, the first time in a long time, I would say. So for that, I would, to me, if we all could have cashed in, look, we already surpassed the Vegas odds. If we could have cashed in, even with Elf and Bullock, in these combinations, I mentioned before, I know getting a long-winded response, but you asked about things we're looking at. I think back to Tibbs talking about different combinations, and you just did a great job in your newsletter. I mean, like lights out, like referencing, data that supports, like certain 2-man and 3-man combinations, and I would say, look, I love to argue, but I would say like an argument is like 2 guys drunk in a bar saying who's better, Bird or Magic. I think a debate is, when you have data to support your argument, and data can be numbers, data can be educated, information. So to me, I love the debate, and I would say I would say our players, like an agent wants to come negotiate. Like, I'm happy to talk to you about your player's contract. Just come with tons of information, because I'm going to have benchmark positions and what guys make at certain ages and, comparables. And, I just think that I don't have a legal background, but I'm assuming like maybe someone preparing a legal brief. You want to have so much data and technology available to information available that there's no refute, and I get it. Some of the shortcomings our current roster has, but I also think, at some point next year or two, we're going to have unveiled this plan they put together to collect these assets, to me, they don't have as many assets as Oklahoma City or as Houston, but we look at cap space this year, look at the core they currently have. To me, there's very few times, even if I'm cursing like an ill-advised shot or like Elf freezing out RJ, I still think to myself, like this all kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And I think just also looking at the landscape of what the NBA is, there will come a point where a lot of the bigger market teams are kind of situated, especially may not have the money at their disposal. And of course, that's where the Knicks can chime in and work their magic. But I just want to touch back with the trade window. So is it correct that it's only 4 hours long? So the actual transfer windows, all right, like it's kind of, it's a figurative window that opens and closes, but really, like most of the deals are done before the window opens. All right. And it's actually like a month long. So in some cases you've already announced a player, like at a press conference, he's already done like his medical, he's already signed a new deal. What's amazing in our sport, it's an import-export business. You have to pay a fee to that team to acquire their rights to then pay that player. So you think about like when Cristiano Ronaldo was sold from Manchester United to Real Madrid, he was sold for over $100 million. Okay, so Real Madrid paid that money to Manchester United, then they had to pay the player after that, an annual salary. So in most cases, when a window opens, that's like when a transfer takes place. The official like the payment transfer goes through. But it's amazing to think how much work is done behind the scenes to that point. We have a trade deadline as well, and I do think kind of like the NBA, things happen kind of down in the very last minute. I'd love to have it at some point that people are looking at us like they look at Danny Ainge or Pat Riley, like when they call it, you don't pick up. I found like in this year's draft, I was constantly trying to trade up in our second round. I feel like no one was biting. And when I asked, maybe it's a compliment that like no one wants to do a deal with us. That they think we're going to fleece them or they think something's going to happen.
That's good though, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a compliment. I also find in all sports, you have different kinds of decision makers and trades. And I think you have a small group of people who don't do any trades. They just don't want to engage in that. They don't want to leave themselves to fall short, and be, looked at poorly. I think you have some who are trying to screw the other team, who are trying to win the deal, like do well for themselves and hurt you. And you've always, try to make like win-win deal. And to me, I would tell you my own ego, I don't spend too much time worrying about like who wins or loses the deal. Like if we turn that player into a positive for our team and we're winning games, then we won it. And whether it's both teams win, only one team wins, there's not enough time to worry about like what other teams are doing. So to me, I also think if you screw a team or you try to win the deal, that team probably wants another deal with you in the future. For me, where a lot of deals are done over the phone and via text. Before our first season we played, I was flying to Los Angeles or to Oakland or, to New York. I was flying places to do deals in person. Because to me, even though I was an assistant general manager in Kansas City before I was here, I just felt like there's equity you can build up in relationships. And I wanted to have that when I called. Maybe guys thought like, that I was like an honest person who wouldn't try to screw them. Also like presenting data, like let's say like what the trade proposal was, letting someone know like how I got there. This is how I value this player based on 8 other players who were the same position, the same age, the same resale value. this is where I got there. That my hope is next time I called that guy, maybe he would look at me differently or respect me a certain way. And that was important to me to kind of build that equity up.
So I have two quick follow-ups on that. One, you mentioned the things that you do and you do not care about when you make a deal. Does public perception of a trade, which I guess maybe it's a little bit different because soccer doesn't kind of have quite the level of national attention as like the NBA or the NFL or something, but it's still, it's a professional sport. People care about this a lot. Does that ever enter your mind? And also I have to ask, in light of what you just said about, maintaining your, your reputation when it comes to this stuff. I'm sure you saw the JJ Redick stuff with David Griffin the other day. Does, if something like that were to come out, about you, well, it wouldn't come out about you, but like, does that kind of stuff worry does that weigh on GM's minds in terms of making sure that you don't have anybody who's going to come back and be like, hey, this guy said one thing and he did something else? Like, how does that play into it all?
What was the first question again? The first part?
So I asked too many things. The public perception. That's
okay.
it.
Yeah. So look, I mean, Nashville. If you follow them from afar, you look at the Predators and Titans. I mean, it's Music City. I always say like, if you want to be, on stage, you go to New York for Broadway. If you're an aspiring actor, if you want to be, on the movies or TV, you go to LA to Hollywood. If you want to be a singer, like. Again, being from New York, I just thought it was country music, like all genres, like Nashville is where you go. It's Music City. It's amazing, like how fast it's been adopted, like as a sports city. I mean, Broadway is kind of like the equivalent of Times Square in Nashville. For the first time the Predators played a Stanley Cup final, like they closed Broadway. They had big screen TVs for the Preds. I mean, it was like crazy. The NFL draft was here a couple years ago. I think they had 200,000 fans were here that week. Yeah, it's surreal. Right. Our first game. We were playing the same night as the Preds. I reached out to the GM of the Predators just about something else, and he said, "Be curious, kind of see how one affects the other." Their venue obviously is much smaller. They play in Bridgestone Arena, which is less than 20,000. Until our stadium, which will be completed this time next year, like May 22, we play in Nissan Stadium where the Titans play. Year one MLS, before the Red Bulls were the Metro Stars. I used to watch them play in Giant Stadium. I mean, like in front of 1,000 fans. So you don't know. Playing an NFL venue, what it'll be like. That first game, we had 60,000 fans that first game.
Wow.
We had 3 times many fans the Preds get. Almost sold out Nissan.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Unbelievable. It was surreal. Just crazy that, we had that and then COVID hit, and it changed our season. Yeah. But like put it in perspective, and we have.
So you do have to worry about this then, I guess.
Yeah, look, we've got a full-time beat writer for the Tennessee local paper. We have, multiple blogs, cover our team on a daily basis, but I would say, I think growing up in New York, I think I probably have a different perception or expectations about not only the fan base, but the media. I was home a couple weeks ago. I mean, I went to a local diner down the street from my family's house. I got the news and the Post, sat there for like 2 hours just reading the sports page, and there was one page dedicated to Douglas and decisions with the Jets, with free agency. One page dedicated to Gettleman and decisions with the Giants. And I took a photo at each of those, sent to my staff. And I said, there's nowhere else in the world where this kind of attention is played toward decision makers, in front offices. And to me, I feel like, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who feel that way growing up, just as we all did. But I feel like I grew up this front row seat to, whether it was guys like, Pat Riley or Dave DeBuscher or Ernie Grunfeld, whether it was Brian Cashman now or Gene Michael, not only do you see every decision made, but the papers scrutinize them all the time, so I don't know if it's sensitive. I mean, toward the end of the season, I think I got like a little salty with the media and probably more national media than the local media. Okay. I think as our team got better and better, and we started getting more accolades or more appreciation, like, that we were doing pretty well. I had a number of members of media who reached out to me who were like, hey, you guys are pretty good. And I'm like, we've been good the whole time. You just noticed it now. So I mean, like, and I've kind of learned a little bit now. I think like maybe we achieved a certain level of success last year, and rather than trying to promote our team, I'll let the players do it on the field. So that's important to me. And I think honestly, maybe growing up in New York and look at the expectations of teams, like the Yankees, like the Knicks, like the Giants or the Rangers. I mean, the myriad of teams you have, I just grew up with that, and There was two. What was the second part?
Oh no, I was just sorry. I told you we could.
I had good answers for both, and I kind of forgot.
The JJ Redick thing from if somebody, do you worry about saying something to a player that's going to come back and bite you in the ass or something?
Yes. So our CEO, he was the CEO at Liverpool.
Oh wow.
And he was there for 10 years. He hired Jurgen Klopp, who led Liverpool to a Premier League championship and a European championship. I mean, Liverpool in England is like the Dallas Cowboys or like the Yankees. Yeah. So he and I, when we first met, about me coming to work, for Nashville in the MLS club, I think we found very quickly like we aligned a lot of different things. And from a recruitment standpoint, we both agreed the best way to recruit players was retention. If your current players are happy, they're going to talk to other players. They're going to say how great it is or how bad it is where they are. Walker Zimmerman, who we acquired last year, he was MLS Defender of the Year. I mean, I'm not saying he's the Giannis of MLS, like different players, but I mean, to have this guy as an anchor of your team. He plays for the U.S. national team. He'll be involved in World Cup qualifying potentially, but we talked about the fact that getting a guy like him, who's not only this good person, but especially in the NBA, you hear about players recruiting, I mean, the fact that Walker's in a locker room with the U.S. national team, the fact that he's so well respected by his peers, if he's happy and feels good about the situation we have here, why wouldn't other guys want to play with this really good player? Like a chance of winning games, but also this guy who's really happy, So I can't speak enough about the situation there in New Orleans, other than the fact that I was hoping that JJ was going to give us more depth at the two. I mean,
me and you both.
Yeah. Yeah. A former player of mine at Duke was very close friends with him. I was there all 4 years he was in college, and they lost to Utah. It was a 7-game series when he was a Clippers. Actually called me in the car together. He and
really
my former player and JJ. And, I'm talking, my former player's talking to me. I'm trying to talk to JJ. And I'm like, dude, you're a free agent. You got to come to New York. And he said at the time, if I come to New York, I'm going to Brooklyn. And this is pre KD and Kyrie and Harden. I may or may not have told him if he goes to Brooklyn, I'd find out where he lives and burn his building down.
That's,
but
that's reality. That's the reality of what it was.
It's the fan in you.
Yeah. But I also appreciate the fact that there were reasons he wanted to be there independent of basketball.
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure why you couldn't also be at Penn Plaza and do that. But I mean, I can appreciate that. I can't speak enough about the front office of, New Orleans.
Sure. Yeah, I know.
But I can say it. Perception is reality sometimes. JJ is, he has his own podcast. That's not nearly as good as you guys, but look, very, very well respected by his peers. Yeah. My guess is when he talks, probably his peers probably listen to him.
People listen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Last soccer question, and then I'm sure we could get more into basketball. You were very active during the 2020 draft. Can you take us through what that whole process is? Is it like the movie Draft Day, or is it just completely over the top dramatization? Is it just a little bit more subdued? What's going on? What are your emotions? Just how is that whole experience unfolding?
So 2020 was the first year we did draft via satellite. Like all sports have done. It was pre-COVID too, but so it was via satellite. And, my friends still make fun of the fact that they said that each of these last 2 years, our first 2 years here, we did it via satellite. They said that I only announced players like David Stern when he was the commissioner of the league. With the second pick, Nashville selects.
Better David Stern
right?
than Mark Tatum. That's important.
I keep waiting for the music in the background to go off after the pick, but that I would tell you, that's definitely one of those pinch yourself moments. Holy cow. I watched this, we used to have parties growing up, watching the NBA draft on TV, trying to pick, the first round. Now I'm doing it. Yeah. That was surreal. As far as being active, what's interesting about college soccer, and I'll be curious to see how this affects college basketball going forward. For sure, in 1985, St. John's Final Four run, I was all in on Chris Mullin, and it's crazy to think Patrick was the enemy at that point. He was, Georgetown was like the evil empire. They were the team that took St. John's down. They were killing everybody. But I always grew up watching college basketball, really kind of it wasn't like Todd McShay or like Mel Kiper, but it was like, let's watch these guys. Who's the next stars in the NBA? And as you see some of these guys, and again, John does a great job like covering the future lottery and what's happening. And I think when you see the guys like Green and Kuminga, who are playing in the G League, I think how well those guys do could potentially see what happened in the NBA, what's happening in MLS. And look, I coached in college for a long time. And, in 2007, the MLS started their academy initiative. And like every other club in the world, like where the Knicks had the Western Knicks. Yeah. And, you have in the minor league baseball system, and, with MLB. In soccer all over the world, you have an academy system, and you can have an under 23 team. You can have, a AAA type, G League age team, but you can also have teams as young as age 9 and 10 years old, and I would tell you, I don't know that I ever signed a kid at like 16, that I watched at age 9, but you create this infrastructure that where you have that. And once that happened and MLS clubs started going, I mean, look, you don't look any further in New York. I mean, Gio Reyna is one of the biggest stars now, in U.S. soccer. He grew up playing for NYCFC's youth academy. He didn't go to college. He signed a professional contract abroad. Most of the top 18, 22-year-old soccer players in our country, and there absolutely are college prospects, who come in MLS. But by and large, if you look at the top 30 prospects per, look at like college classes, like a high school seniors, if you take the top 20 guys, maybe 14 of them signed directly into their MLS clubs now.
Really?
So yeah, so where I think there's definitely a perception, especially among maybe some of the clubs that have leadership, maybe by those who aren't American, who come from Europe or South America, who are usually identifying players through their own youth system at age 14, 15, 16. Maybe this is one of those things, maybe for having coached in college for a long time, being American, grew up around college soccer. I just feel strongly we're going to find value in the college draft. So for us, the expansion teams draft first, so we were in ironically, we're in a year where there's 2 expansion teams. So there's a coin toss, and Miami got the first pick, we had the second pick. Okay. But I just felt like not only would we get value at number 2, we also traded for the 11th pick, the 13th pick, and we drafted 3 first-round picks. Number 11, Alistair Johnston, out of Wake Forest. He was originally from St. John's, transferred to Wake after his sophomore season at St. John's. He was the 3rd right back taken. Probably would have been a candidate for Rookie of the Year. If they changed the award in MLS from Rookie of the Year to Newcomer of the Year because of how many players were coming from abroad and how many players there were, who were coming out of youth academies. But he was for sure one of the top 2 or 3 players in the draft, and he was a 3rd player position probably on the draft board selected. This last week he played for the first time for Canada, in a World Cup qualifier. This was a kid, 21 years old, totally unheralded, never played for his country before. Was not like a big-time MLS prospect, but we watched him enough as a collegian, believed in him to trade up for him, and gave him an opportunity. So I just kind of feel like maybe the experiences we have, we're just going to, place maybe more value in the draft as well as team as well.
So I'm listening to you talk about the draft and the Knicks, and I'm like, we have to talk about Obi Toppin. You just did a draft as we don't need to say, you don't need to say it. It's the evidence is out there. You nailed it. It's not just Obi, and we'll see what happens with him, but GMs year in and year out, clearly nobody has figured this stuff out in the NBA. There were reports that the Kings were ready to trade Marvin Bagley. He's 3 years in the league. We could go back year after year after year. There's a top 2, a top 3, a top 4 pick that's just not only do they fail to live up to expectations, but they're like it's a complete bust. Littered throughout top 10s, lotteries. I'm curious what you, as again now running a draft room, looking at. We could talk about OB or the Knicks, however you want to take this, but like. Do you think that there is a better way to do it for NBA franchises? Do you think it has something to do with the fact that they're drafting players from like all of these different college conferences, or like why is it so much harder in the NBA for GMs and people running teams to get this stuff right?
It's interesting. I'm plugging one of my buddies, my college roommate Eric. I'm sure he'll watch this when it's live. He played football at Pace, and he's a big NFL fan. He's a huge Giants fan, and I was just talking this morning, watching Jets drafting Wilson versus trading the pick or keeping Sam Darnold. The third pick, it's definitely either Fields or Jones. And I listened to Mike Lombardi talk about like why the Niners like Jones. I bring it up kind of to look at like I think the uncertainty of drafting a quarterback in the first round, whether it's number one or anywhere in the first round. I mean, the hit rate's like 50%.
Yeah.
I mentioned about like friends I've drawn from. I've had twice with our whole staff at our staff retreat, and then just with our scouting analytics department. I mentioned this to you. Yeah. I had Shane Battier do a Zoom with our whole staff, and then he got his. Now, obviously everyone knows who Shane is, but he's now the director of analytics for the Miami Heat. And look, I mean, to be anywhere in the vicinity of Pat Riley in general, to me, I mean, that's like, like anyone would do that, but, to parlay his career into what he's doing now, we had a call fairly recently with the Heat's analytics department, and I had my analytics department and scouting department all together. So it was this great like think tank, and it's non-threatening to share ideas, best practices, and case studies because we're in different leagues, and what I love what Shane talks about a lot in regards to how to use analytics is, like being like the card counters at the casino, and I love the analogy because
it's fantastic.
Yeah. Because I say data driven, my director of strategy analytics, he's talking about maybe more data informed, data driven. If you're a slave, you just make decisions based solely on information or numbers.
Yeah.
I think data informed, every department at my club has different technologies they can use to help extract information, whether it's physical data, like miles covered during games, or, it's number of crosses in the box, certain positions, and again, you guys do an amazing job, like in the newsletter, like every day, like get the information you share, we have all this information to help make decisions. I like the idea of being kind of like this card counter, and rather than guessing on certain players, maybe try to look at what positions tend to translate at the next level out of college. I asked this question today, and I'll bring it back to Obi because I asked this question to my buddy today. I don't follow the NFL enough, like really kind of to know enough about it. But I said to me, like, if the hit rate's only 50% in a quarterback, like, why wouldn't you try to acquire a free agent? And also knowing how much money these guys cost, I think about like a backup goalkeeper in soccer, maybe like as a backup quarterback in the NFL. You really want a 1 and a 2. You want like a 1 and a 1A because they're always going to play. So okay. Surely, Jimmy Garoppolo we were talking about, like maybe he only played 3 games with the Patriots before he was traded. But my guess there was enough of a sample size that they said, look, as he's demonstrating to be a 1A, we can acquire him using fewer assets. We can pay him less than this first round quarterback we're going to pay because the salary cap, the structure is very low early on. Mm-hmm. You think of like the NBA salary cap, at some point, right? Mitch is a restricted free agent next year, then becomes a free agent. The window closed and you got to pay these guys, what they've earned, but to me, I kind of think like, if it was more like hypothetical, I said to me, if guys in your offensive line are wide receivers, if it's a higher hit rate, why not trade down and collect more assets, and then try to sign maybe like a 1A quarterback rather than flip a coin for your quarterback. I mean, and his answer, and I get it, if you hit it on a quarterback, like now you've got this guy who is like this elite all-star who can transcend your club. But, then you also have teams like the Baltimore Ravens went to the Super Bowl with Trent Dilfer, the Giants won with Jeff Hostetler. I mean, I don't know that you have to hit it. I don't know about the NFL, but bring it back kind of maybe to Obi, I guess to me, I absolutely appreciate it's very like Billy Beane-esque, right? Like drafting this guy who had played in 4 years of college, and maybe they felt there's some things they kind of knew about him, maybe opposed to, a kid who was overseas for a year, maybe someone, who they didn't know enough about. I totally get that. There are different pressures when you're drafting in the equivalent of lottery. I totally appreciate that. To me, I just I don't think it's safe to pick somebody that you kind of, that the tea leaves are telling you are going to work. I think that's like smart, and I mean like, along the same way that this UK Intel told them to draft IQ, or they really wanted Maxey and they couldn't get him, so they trade down for IQ, whatever it was that happened. I mean, like, my guess is that Leon probably called Minnesota and said, what do you want for 1? And then probably, and then worked his way down to 8. And so, like, if I can't get anything better than that, I mean, look, like in my head, I'm thinking to myself, man, if they can get LaMelo, be unbelievable. But obviously
that's what's been keeping me up lately is wondering.
Here's what I'm saying. This is about how hard it is, right? Like the sample size you're looking at, you're going to have to gauge what the standard is the league he was playing in. Yeah. You're going to have to look at his jump shot and maybe the hitch he had, and look at where his brother's a different player. I mean, I think they'll probably be the NBA's version of Serena and Venus. I mean,
good comp.
I would take Lonzo. Venus is in the Hall of Fame probably.
Venus pretty good.
I'm cool with getting Melo's brother. I think Lonzo's good. But my guess is there probably were some questions. But again, I think it depends on the team you have that is watching him live, the team you have that's doing workouts, the team you have that are interviewing and grilling that guy. I mean, we drafted Jack Mayer in that first draft. He was a number 2 pick in my first draft at Nashville. I drove from Nashville to Bloomington, Indiana, and I wanted to meet with him in the town where his school was. We went to dinner at the restaurant of his choice. I didn't want to be in a hotel room. I didn't want to be in my office. I didn't want it to be like a jacket and tie interview. I want to see him where they'd be most relaxed and comfortable. My thought was it's easy to grill him also. We did some of those things as well. And he came in and worked out with us, but I want to spend time just he and I. And I want to get an idea, like this guy, if I'm only married to him, by my first draft pick and number 2 in the draft, I want to feel good about what I was getting. And I can't tell you what it was about Obi. I think it's probably unrealistic for anyone to say, I knew Julius was going to be an all-star, this time last year. There's no way,
yeah.
But I would say if the plan was to trade Julius for other assets and who's the best 4 on the board we can get, there's no point guards available. I would just say, I understand how they got there to Obi. Now, Killian Hayes was gone. Melo was gone. I don't know who else they rated. I was kind of keen on Kira Lewis at the time. Whatever. But I would just say, I think that sometimes there's agreeing understanding, and I think agreeing is emotional. We wouldn't have to agree. That's how you feel. If you said to me, I believe RJ is going to be a transcendent player who's going to score more points than any player in his draft class. All right. I actually believe that. Okay. But all right. But if you say that's wrong, my opinion, how I feel can be wrong. All right. Now, if I said, based on this information, all right, I need to understand this, that's different than agreeing. So to me, I would just say, I don't know if Obi was a guy that I wanted, even after Hayes came off the board and Ball came off the board, but I kind of get what they did, so, yeah,
fingers crossed, basically.
Stockholm syndrome. I also feel a challenge we have now is because Julius has done so well and people are saying trade Obi, you kind of can't trade him now because his stock has fallen so far. They've got to find to kind of play him back in now. Jimmy G, you got to play him enough games. Someone watch him and say, hey, this guy could do it, and then trade him. Because right now you get nothing for him. Right now he's Dennis Smith Jr. right now.
But speaking as a GM and your whole thought process, and I want to talk about the Mavericks as well, because you're listening or watching this, today is game day against the Mavs. With Randall, is there this idea of how on earth can I trade this guy because of what he's doing? Or, can you rationalize something of, well, he's a great player, but look at our timeline and how we're kind of moving about. It seems like a very precarious, slippery slope to be on, and not necessarily the most envious of positions.
Look, I think about that you mentioned before, the short-term win now versus a long-term sustained success. My guess is that the same torch that I was going to find JJ Redick's apartment if he chose the Nets over the Knicks. My guess is if Leon traded Julius now, Tim's probably grab that same torch, attacking their offices. Yeah. But I would say this. And it's interesting also because, I think the team that plays at Barclays Center, it's almost like the Nets could be another 4-letter word. I think those all now, but I would say I get how they built their team out. And I actually there's a lot of similarities to what they did. You have to build this young core first. All right. One, in a salary cap league, these guys, these rookie contracts cost less. All right. So it makes sense to do that. Also, as bad as Brooklyn's been, as bad as New York's been, you can get better the fastest through the draft. You mentioned to Shane Batty's his scouting department also, where international basketball is picked up, the reality is probably 97, 98% of all the players that all teams in our league look at in the NBA, they're all coming out of college. They're all coming out of the same pond, right? So the reality is, there are teams that have success with trades. I mean, the last successful trade, if you don't count, or the last successful free agent we've gotten, I mean, if you don't count like a Amare Stoudemire as like a sign and trade, maybe it's Amare. I mean, Allen Houston, I think was the last like big name free agent Knicks have gotten. And I think because of the Yankees, you think about like Reggie Jackson and Catfish Hunter in the mid '70s. I think people assume like New York is it's a free agent destination in all sports. And I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think the LA teams in all sports have that. All right. I think, look, I live in a state. There are 3 states in our country that have no state income tax. The state of Tennessee, the state of Florida is the reason why Miami teams do so well. You're on the beach and no state income tax, and Texas. And in all sports, Dallas and Houston seem to do well for agents. So I would just say, I think the idea of like a free agent, like the idea of KD and Kyrie, I think that can happen. I think it's a bit of a pipe dream for any team that thinks it's going to happen there. And I just know it happened in New York. And I think because we all grew up in New York, I think it probably took me leaving to kind of see that. If you think anything outside of New York is small, the reality is I think there's other markets that are equally as attractive and have different reasons to attract players. So I think you have to do it in the draft. And look, the Nets were shrewd in how they acquired D'Angelo Russell. All right. D'Angelo Russell also became an all-star and also became a chip that they used in a sign and trade for Kevin Durant. Yeah. I'm not saying that, Jeremy, your point, I'm not saying that Julius is going to be that chip. All right. But like I go back and forth, Tibbs versus Leon and myself versus my head coach, the head coach short-term versus the GM long-term or president operations long-term. I think all the time, like I would love for this guy who's not getting MVP chance, at the Garden, and you read I don't know if you guys read his article that he wrote in the Players Tribune. It was unbelievable. It was so cool.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, like, how do you not root for Julius? I love him. But if you told me that like there was a deal to be had to trade him someday to Phoenix, get Devin Booker, I mean, like I love Julius. I will still root for him in the Western Conference. If he's playing for Phoenix, not playing against us. I'm cool with that. And I think that's sports, So, I mean, if what Leon and Brock and co, what they've done is develop this young core, this group of assets, where maybe the biggest asset is this guy that our fans would hate to lose the most. I mean, I think unfortunately, Julius and Obi are kind of tied to each other right now, and I think it's, there's this emotional pull, as you mentioned, to Julius. But I would say as a GM, I mean, like as much as I love him as a player, part of me also watches him as an asset. And part of me sees Obi as, like on his worst day. I mean, look, he doesn't play more than 9 minutes a game. I mean, like on his worst day, what would he do playing 25, 30 minutes a game? Could he give you 15 and 8? And if the same offense they run is being run through RJ and he's getting you 24 and 8, addition by subtraction, if those two replace Julius, by his contribution, that's now allowed you to trade him as a chip for something else. I don't know, but in a sport where big guys are almost obsolete, Julius's value is that he can play in the perimeter also. I think for as long as Julius plays well, I think he's always been someone that I think they have to look at kind of as an asset as well.
So just in terms of the Mavericks, from how the trade unraveled and it just seemed like an overnight thing, do you get the sense that it really did just kind of materialize all at once and Porzingis was shipped off to Dallas? Do you think there was more due diligence? Because I know that there's certainly some debate about the idea of how quickly things kind of came into fold. And obviously there's no parallel universe that we can necessarily see. But in terms of Porzingis, I mean, where are you at emotionally as a fan? And maybe is there a crossover between your GM instincts and how the two intersect?
So it's funny about my emotions as a fan. I've talked to sports psychologists and therapists about having outside interests away from work. It's super healthy. They like work-life balance. You have to have that. The idea that my release from work is this team that I'm also watching and studying their cap and looking at how many players are restricted free agents versus unrestricted free agents. I don't know that the total release from my job, because there's a lot of things I look at that I relate to work. There are things I pull out of the email newsletter I show my staff as case studies. I'm going to make sure you know that. I think it's outstanding. So it is hard for me to separate myself. So as a fan, I would say I don't know that I would throw a rock at KP if he was going to walk down the street. But I wouldn't like over pat on the back. I for sure wouldn't do that. You know,
because he's so tall, right? It'd be hard to reach him.
He's so tall. Yeah. I mean, like,
Jump up.
Yeah. I mean, as a fan, but to be honest with you, I mean, like, if you cross his path, he'd probably get hurt, you know? So, I mean, like, I wouldn't want him to trip and hurt himself, you know? I mean,
Wouldn't
like,
want that. No.
Yeah, you know, like, but I would say in my role, I think I look at like someone like KP and I look at like how trades happen. And I was saying this to my son Daniel, probably watching this also. So I'm really shameless plugs to my friends and family, you know, like once you know, the idea of like a disgruntled player in a trade very rarely is a player at the height of their powers and performing well on and off the court traded. You know, the reality is, you know, like when Carmelo was traded from Denver, he was telling me, "Hey, look, if you don't trade me, I'm leaving as a free agent." You know, like you know, get as fast as you can because I'm leaving either way. I remember at the time thinking, like, why are we trading for this guy? He wants to come until Brooklyn got involved. You know, when they got involved, I think then we were forced to trade for him. You know, I think what happened with KP is he got more and more dissatisfied and wasn't bought in a different light, which I with Obi before. You have to worry about this diminished asset. I think you have to worry about things like injury history, which are very common to many big men, not just to KP. Okay, but clearly the guy has an injury history, right? Like, you have to worry about, you know, how that affect getting something for him. You have to concern about like attitude, you know, well, it's him, well, it's his brother, whatever else is going on, like in his, you know, his entourage, you know, like, you know, how that affect how he's perceived in the marketplace. And I think they got to a point where they probably felt like this diminishing asset. If we don't do something soon, you know, we're going to lose this asset. One, we won't be able to get equal value for him. Two, you know, he could potentially walk at some point. I mean, this is one thing I think people don't realize about Julius too. I mean, again, I love Julius. You know, I mean, like, you know, he could turn down a deal this offseason and then walk the following year.
I bet you he turns down an extension offer this offseason. I mean, we talked about it on the pod a bunch, so I don't, you know, it's because of the max that they could offer him. At this point.
Yeah, look, I mean, you know, I'm not going to give rules of engagement because every team is different. But for me, I mean, you know, the clock is ticking, time is ticking. We get within 2 years, the player's contract expiring. And I think 18 months to me, when your clock hits that, you got to tell yourself, if we haven't re-signed this guy or close, I think you got to move him. Wow. You know, because if you don't, there is now a threat. You won't get anything for him. You know, and I would say the only thing worse, and we look at timelines. You know, I can't look at KP's contract in front of me. I really try to block a lot of his time out in my head altogether. You know, like
smart.
Yeah, you know, like. But I would say my guess was at the time came to the leadership at that time, and I think it was Steve Mills at the time. I think, you know, who was involved in that deal. Probably thought, if I don't do something soon, we're not going to do it. Now, why did he do that deal? I think, you know, there's armchair quarterbacking. My guess is that the four of us all probably were pretty happy with DSJ when they first traded for him. I mean, look, he was valuable at the time. You know, he was playing regularly for Dallas. He was highly sought after in a draft. You know, I mean, like, you know, at that point, what was it, New York or nowhere, right? I mean, like, even when he first came to the team, like, it did
I remember that.
A little bit, you know, I mean, like, you know, I think it's ironic to think back now to that trade and think that the most important chip out of everything moved around could be the 2021 Dallas Mavericks first round pick is amazing. You know, I mean, like, I don't know if you guys, I'm watching on my phone, Knicks Wolves last night, raced back to my hotel to watch the fourth quarter of my phone to then turn on Mavs Celtics, you know, at the hotel bar. I
can't do it anymore. I engaged in a little bit of the Schadenfreude to begin the year. It's just it hasn't been going well of late.
I'm one of those guys too. I mean, like, you know, wear different socks depending on how they're doing, and, you know, certain things. And yeah, I mean, I'm all about that. You know, like, yeah. You know, I was trying to convince people that Luka's not as good a player because of his 3-point field goal percentage, and he hit, I think, like 6 for 10 last night or something like that. You know what I mean? He's awesome.
He's gonna be okay.
I don't think KP deserves to play with a player like Luka. I think KP should have to play with a lesser caliber player.
Like Dennis Smith Jr. I think they should find their way to the same team.
Match made in heaven. I think
KP should trade to Sacramento. I think he should have to play there, like in that city, like with that team for Luke Walton. That's what I think he deserves.
Talk about matches made in heaven. Mike, you've been just beyond generous with your time. I do have to ask you one more before we get out of here. Give me, and this is going on the record, your friends, your family, your loved ones, Knicks Nation are going to hold you to this. Over under RJ Barrett all-star appearances. I'll give you a second to think about it if you need.
What's the over? You're give me over.
You're going to set the over under. Give me your prediction. Yes.
In his career, all-star appearances.
In his career, all-star appearances.
Now, you want to say what I think, or what I think they could over under?
Oh, give me both. Can you give me both? What do you? I'll give you my over under. My over under right now, which has changed from the beginning of the year. I think my over under right now is 2.5.
So I obviously look. I mean, maybe I worked at Duke. I've been drinking a Kool-Aid. I was gonna say 6.5 was my over under.
That's your. Oh my God. God bless you.
I'm not gonna lie, that was actually my over under as well. And then I kind of
6.5.
It was, but then I was like, maybe that's a little too lofty. So then I kind of got down to 4.5.
Old.
Yeah.
And I mean, look at the data you give me once a week, Jonathan, about like there are players his age producing at the level he's producing at.
Yeah. Yes, but then I just looked at who all the players that didn't make the All-Star team in the Eastern Conference this year. There's some pretty damn good players who didn't. Maybe that's
look at the age of some of those guys and what they do when RJ is 24. How many of those guys must have been in the Eastern Conference at that time?
Okay.
I love how your newsletter is the one that's fueling all of this too. Where
and yet I give
a few months removed from you having him as like the 5th best asset, now Mike's got 6.5. This is progress. This is growth.
Why do you bring up old podcasts? This is a new podcast.
So
wait, you're giving me a 6.5 over under? Are you going over? I guess.
Yeah, my guess would be 7 total.
Your guess is 7. Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to sweeten it. So
okay. All right, we have to get. I'm sure we have some casino or another as a sponsor to the show. We have to get them to set the line.
FanDuel.
Sure, FanDuel. Why not? Mike, this is usually the portion of the show where I ask the person to plug whatever it is they want to promote. Are tickets available? I can't believe we haven't talked about this, but very, very briefly, can fans in Nashville go and watch the opener once it's here?
So I think recently it just came out that we can have, it's kind of state by state. I think we can have, it's either 30 or 33% capacity.
Okay, that's not bad.
Yeah, I know the Titans for their playoff game in the same venue had over 20,000 fans.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I don't know off the top of my head how many tickets are available, but I do know that I think we've got over 10,000 ticket holders. So I know they can all get a ticket.
Oh, that's great.
I don't know enough about the total available, but yeah, I mean, it's exciting to think it's been year 2 starting for us. It's hard to believe,
Well, I will plug and promote you for you. You are one of the, I mean, I don't know how rising stars in the world of sports management. You're killing it. I kind of want you to ditch soccer for basketball at some point. Not gonna lie,
but not for the competitors, or else they'll be too good. And then
he knows where I want him to go. He does. I don't need to say it. But in the meantime, I feel bad for the rest of Major League Soccer to have to contend with Nashville because clearly, good things are happening. So just, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and share some insight.
Thanks much. This is awesome, guys. Take care.